Thank you for joining us for another episode of Marking the Times. This is Dr. Mark Hitchcock. I'm here in my office at Faith Bible Church in Edmond, Oklahoma. And as always, I appreciate you taking time to watch this video blog every week and catch up with what's going on in the world today related to Bible prophecy. And also listen to the answers to some questions I receive. I've gotten a good steady a number of questions in, and probably next week I'm going to kind of look at some things that are happening in the world around us. But I want to answer one more question that came in, because we've gotten a lot of questions lately about the rapture. If you've been watching some of the previous episodes, you'll know we've talked about that several times. Here's a question, another question I got about the rapture. It says, Dr. Hitchcock, many say that there are no preconditions for the rapture to occur. What about 2 Thessalonians 2, 1-3? The church in Thessalonica was freaked out that they had missed the rapture, that Jesus had come and gone without them. Paul reassured them that the rapture cannot occur until two things happen. One, the great apostasy, and two, the Antichrist is revealed. I believe we are on the front end of the great apostasy, but there isn't a single Christian leader on the planet that has identified the Antichrist. Can you help me understand why leaders say no preconditions exist for the rapture to happen, yet the Antichrist isn't revealed yet? Well, one thing about this question I like, he says, no, not a single Christian leader on the planet has identified the Antichrist. Well, a lot of people have identified the Antichrist. They're just always wrong when they do that. It's a good question, because I'm of the belief that there aren't any preconditions for the rapture. And I don't think in 2 Thessalonians 2 that he's talking about preconditions for the rapture. He's talking about preconditions for the day of the Lord, or the tribulation period. Get a little bit of background here. The book of 2 Thessalonians, Paul wrote this letter to the Thessalonians from Corinth on his second missionary journey, probably not long after he wrote 1 Thessalonians. And he wrote this letter because he'd received word that the Thessalonians had received a counterfeit letter, or a spurious letter. Someone had written to them claiming that it was a letter from Paul. And the gist of this letter was they were telling the Thessalonians that they were now in the day of the Lord, that they were in the tribulation period. And that wasn't difficult for them to believe, because they were undergoing a lot of persecution. So in the midst of persecution and trouble and difficulty in life, they get this letter by someone claiming to be Paul, saying, you're already in the tribulation period. You're in the day of the Lord. And so Paul writes, beginning here in chapter 2, verse 1, and he says, now we request you, brethren, with regard to the coming of our Lord Jesus Christ and our gathering together to him. And I take the gathering together to him there as referring to the rapture. That you may not be quickly shaken from your composure, or be disturbed either by a spirit or a message or a letter as if from us. And that's what had happened, to the effect that the day of the Lord has come. So they'd been told in this letter the day of the Lord had come. Now, by the way, one thing I just want to mention here real quickly. If Paul had taught them that they were going to go through the day of the Lord, in other words, they'd go through the tribulation before the rapture occurred, then they wouldn't have been this upset. In other words, these people are they're shaken, they're disturbed to hear that they're in the day of the Lord. If Paul had taught them they were going to go through the day of the Lord, they wouldn't have been upset by that. They would have said, this is exactly what Paul taught us. This is what we expect. So to me, the fact that they're disturbed and shaken to hear that they're in the day of the Lord means that Paul must have taught them that they wouldn't be in the day of the Lord. So that's why I think they're so shocked by this. But Paul wants to correct this idea that they're in the tribulation period of the day of the Lord. And as a corrective to this false teaching, Paul names two events that have to happen before the day of the Lord can truly be said to have come. So he's not talking about two events that have to happen before the rapture, but two events that have to happen for the day of the Lord, or the tribulation, to truly be said to have come. And those two events are a falling away, a great falling away, and the revelation of the Antichrist, or the man of sin. So he's going to have to be revealed before the day of the Lord comes, because the event that starts the 7-year tribulation period is when the Antichrist, this final world ruler, comes and makes a covenant or a treaty with Israel for 7 years. So these two preconditions, the great apostasy and the revelation of the man of sin, or the Antichrist, these are preconditions for the beginning of the tribulation period, or the coming of the day of the Lord, not for the rapture. So that's an important distinction. So then I believe that Jesus could come at any time. The rapture is possible any day. It's impossible no day. And there aren't any preconditions for the rapture of the church. So hope that helps clarify that passage. It's an important one to understand really in light of coming events. And hopefully that'll clarify this idea of preconditions for the rapture. You and I need to live as if Christ could come at any moment. I mean, I believe he could come today. He could come tonight while we're asleep. And we need to live in light of that and allow that hope to be a purifying, cleansing hope in our lives. Again, thank you for joining us. God bless you. We hope to see you again next time.